Okay. Hi, everyone. So in this video, I'm going to be talking all about night terrors and specifically what they are, why they happen, and how you can help eliminate them from your little one. And I apologize that I'm late starting this video. I couldn't figure out how to get it to go live. I'm here in my playroom, so just think of this kind of as like a play date. My kids are around. So, might have interruptions. I have all my notes on this sheet, so in case I get distracted, I can make sure I cover everything. So in this video, I'll be talking specifically about children under 4 years old. So that's the population that I've worked with, mainly toddlers and young children. But the reasons for night terrors and some of the tips can definitely be applied to older children, even to adults. So it can be useful kind of for anyone, but I'll be kind of specifically talking about the unique age of under 4. And night terrors are a little bit more simple in younger children. So I'll be talking more specifically about children I've worked with and what I would normally do and what they mean for that age group. Okay, so first I want to talk about what is a night terror. Well, night terrors typically happen in the first 2 to 3 hours after you go to sleep. Most of them occur during deep sleep, which is the stage of sleep that's in the first kind of half of the night and the first 2 to 3 hours of the night. So they're a little bit different from nightmares, which happen in the second half of the night. Night terrors can happen at any point in the night, but most people report them in the first 2 to 3 hours of the night. So they're in a unique stage of sleep. And what parents report is that their children wake up. They're usually either like crying or screaming. So the word terror kind of, they're in a state of terror. They might be thrashing, kicking. Older kids might be even like standing up and moving. And they just seem really kind of distraught and scared. When the parent goes to them, the thing about night terrors is that's different from nightmares is that when you go to them, they aren't responsive. So some children have their eyes completely shut, and others have their eyes open, so it looks like they're awake, but they are completely not responsive. They can't respond to you. They don't know you're there necessarily, and it's really scary for parents because there's no way that you can kind of console them and connect with them, and they're completely not responding to you. Where in nightmares, they're more responsive and you can kind of connect and they are aware that you're there. They might last anywhere from a couple minutes. Some parents report, longer than that, and it can be really hard to get them back to sleep after they're in this state. And it can be really hard to know what to do, and you almost have to kind of wait it out until you eventually can get them back to sleep. It can be hard to wake them up, and it's even suggested that you don't necessarily try to wake them up. You just kind of try to wait it out, do what you can until they're in a state that they can go back to sleep. And if you look at brain activity in children having night terrors, it looks as if they're asleep. So it is a sleep state, but it's like a heightened state of kind of terror in that state. But their brain, they are asleep. So it can be really scary for parents to have them in this state and to know what to do. You typically see them in the first half of the night. And the reason, I'll get into the why. So why do these occur? And actually, I want to say that when I have children or clients with night terrors, I kind of think of it as a spectrum. So you can have really severe cases where they last long. They're very, moving around, kicking, very upset. And then some clients I have it's not even really necessarily a night terror, but children that are grunting, groaning, moving, active. And when I see anything kind of along that spectrum, especially in the first half of the night, to me, it is an indicator of what's going on. And I treat it very similar, no matter where your child lies along the spectrum. So it can kind of range in any case. And some parents report them really frequently, some once in a while, but they all kind of mean the same thing when you do have them. So all of these tips can really apply to anywhere along that spectrum that you see this type of behavior. Some children are just active sleepers, move, grunt, groan. That's normal. But sometimes there are things we can do to reverse even those little signs of like being agitated during sleep. Okay, so why do they happen? Well, when a client reports night terrors to me, it's a really clear sign to me that this child is overtired or overexhausted before they go to sleep. So when children have night terrors, it's linked to being in an overexhausted, overtired state during the day, and especially leading into bedtime. The more you have them in that state before bed, the more likely you are to have a night terror. When you help reverse that, they all go away. So they're absolutely something that you can help with. They're not a sleep disorder that there's kind of nothing you can do, or you have to take drugs at all. There's absolutely things you can do to help them. And it really, to me, is that clear signal that they're tired. And what they reflect is that their nervous system is almost in a state of, I kind of call it like wired, tired. And what happens is as children get more and more tired throughout the day, they hit a point where their body just gets exhausted. They start producing a lot of cortisol and stress hormones, adrenaline, and their body gets a physical exhaustion as they get more and more tired throughout the day. And the more likely, or the more your child has that state before bed or isn't getting enough sleep, then that's when you see night terrors. So to me, it's very simple. When parents report them, I know, okay, this child is just very tired. There's a reason why they're in this state, and then let's help to reverse it, and let's help to have them more rested and not in this state. Once you do that, it just disappears. So I've never had a client that we don't get rid of the night terrors, or at least minimize them so they're infrequent. So that's, to me, really simple to point out. When you get kind of older children, and especially adults, that overexhausted kind of cortisol, adrenaline state that can cause night terrors can be more complicated. So in adults, it could be maybe like too much caffeine, too much working, emotional stress. There's a lot of things that can kind of factor into that exhaustion in adults. But in under 4-year-olds, it's, to me, very simple. They're just exhausted and tired, and their system's running on too much adrenaline. And we want to dampen that down and get them more rest and get out of that state. So it's a little bit more simple. And what's interesting is in summertime, night terrors increase. So what you see is a lot of parents reporting them, or reporting them more frequently. And there's a few reasons for this. One is that just in general, physical activity increases in the summer. So if you have a toddler, they're outside more, running around, moving, and that just contributes to kind of the exhaustion that their body might have before bed. A lot of times it can be linked to heat exhaustion. So if your child's outside in the heat all day, that can make their body exhausted, increase cortisol, all of the same things, and it can contribute or worsen any kind of night terrors that they might have. And then also in summertime, I notice with my clients, there's a lot of schedule changes that just make the child more tired in general. So things like maybe missing a nap or having too short of a nap in the car. It could be, oh, Josh, stop.
I didn't want to interrupt.
What are you doing? Oh. So it could be, having too short of a car nap, staying up too late. And it could be a combination of all the things, either missing a nap, being out in the sun too long, too much physical exhaustion. And that's what kind of makes the night terrors come out more frequently in the summertime. So I get a lot of reports and questions about them in the summer. And that's really why. It's just the more exhausted they are, the more likely they are to have them. And all of those things can contribute. So yeah, it's very clear, again, they're in this exhausted state. So for me, how to help with a night terror is really thinking about how can we eliminate that state. So how can we help a child go to bed when they're not in an exhausted state? How can we get them more rest? And what kind of changes are we going to do so that we can get rid of the night terrors? So it can be really different for every family in terms of what we want to do to help them and what's happening in their sleep that they're not getting enough and what changes they need. So every family is a little bit different, but I want to give you, I have kind of 4 main tips of what I might normally look at and what can help you identify what changes will help to eliminate those night terrors and what I normally see. Just in general, I think being aware of the reason why they're happening can be really helpful for families, because what a lot of times I'll explain it to them and they'll say, oh, okay, yeah, that makes sense. On Saturday, we were out at the beach and they had a late bedtime and they had more night terrors. So a lot of times just watching your child and understanding that's the reason can help you identify what it is that's making them exhausted before bedtime. So keeping a log is something I always do with clients. If we're unsure of, and we want to look at it, like if clients say, oh, there's nights where they have them and nights where they don't, that's great to me, because then we can figure out what's happening on nights that they do have them and what's happening on nights that they don't. So keeping a log really helps me kind of troubleshoot and figure out what are the good days and what are the bad days, and then make the adjustments. So that's always something that you can do if you want to try to figure your little one out and figure out what's going on in their day that might be causing it. Some of the biggest shifts, so I'm going to talk about 4 big changes that I normally see and do after kind of problem solving and figuring it out. One of the big things you can look for, so if you have kind of good days and bad days, one thing I notice that we change a lot is their bedtime. So that's something you can look at, because what happens is as the day goes on, they get more and more tired, and it kind of increases, and then they hit a wall where that's when they start getting exhausted. They start having the cortisol, the adrenaline, all of the things you want to avoid them being in that state before bed. And one of my big goals with clients with night terrors is figuring out when we want to put them to bed so we can avoid, you almost want to put them to bed right before they hit that point. If they're already exhausted, already tired, then it's almost a little bit too late. So watching for a good bedtime to avoid that state is one of the things we often change. And for some clients, even 20 minutes earlier has made a huge difference in their night, and getting rid of those early night terrors and wake ups. This can apply to children who are waking up in the early half of the night too, sometimes adjusting bedtime a little bit. So we always try to find that point before they get tired. Every toddler and child has different types of what they call like tired cues. The ones I work with that have night terrors often get ramped up before bed. It's that adrenaline, that cortisol. So some parents don't even really see them as tired cues. Like my son, he starts running circles and running laps, and that's a sign to me, okay, he's getting that adrenaline, that cortisol, we got to bring it down and get him to bed. So watching for those types of cues can be helpful, but it depends on the day. Sometimes he sometimes he just gets tired and glazed over. And so just watching them, trying to figure out that point before they get exhausted. And again, children with night terrors do tend to ramp up before bed, which you don't want, and getting them to bed before that point. Also, sometimes with night terrors, what we do is think about, what activities are leading from dinner time to bedtime. And if there are activities that are, again, ramping up that adrenaline, we want to tone it down a little bit. So my general rule, no TV after dinner. And sometimes we make small adjustments and say, okay, no television, no screens, try to do like a quiet activity. Maybe don't take them outside for like a lot of like running and heat exhaustion, and let's try to calm them down. And that can be helpful in addition for children who have that ramped up adrenaline, cortisol. And some kids don't even necessarily show signs, and parents will say, well, they're always kind of ramped up, they're always and what can happen sometimes is kids just get used to being tired and living in a tired body the same way adults can. So they don't really even show signs. And in that case, we don't even really look at cues. And I say, let's just kind of use our logic and try to make changes. And then what happens is once they start sleeping a little better, parents will start noticing that difference. But sometimes at the beginning, there's not really they're just kind of wired children all the time. Hi. So that's some bedtime things you can look at, is the timing and then what's going on before bedtime and if there's any shifts that you can make there. During the day, hi. Naps are a big thing you want to look at, or that I look at. And if they're not having a good enough nap or a proper nap, if they're a child that's still napping, what happens is that tiredness that's kind of accumulating until nap time doesn't really get relief. So it just adds to it, and they're more exhausted by bedtime, and they're more, have that adrenaline, all of that. Some clients I've had, there was one who she was going to a play group, napping her in the stroller on the way home. So she was getting about a 30-minute nap, and then really tired by bedtime. And that was the cause. Once we started napping her at home, getting a restorative nap, the night terrors went away. So that can be something to think about. Especially, I do see a lot of clients who say, oh, we had a short car nap because we were out at the beach, or we're out at the zoo all day. So that's something to watch for, is the nap just not as good because they're out doing stuff, and then that combined with the heat exhaustion could be enough. So that's something to think about as well, is daytime and if they're not getting proper naps. And what you can do to work on the naps. Sometimes we have to work on naps itself and get those better so that night terrors can go away. Some kids, even sometimes how we fix it is they're waking up too early in the morning. So there's more hours in the day for them to just be tired, and it kind of builds and builds. So having them sleep in a little bit more can be enough to help them throughout the day to get that state. I always say good sleep starts in the morning, and sometimes that's what we have to do, is help with the morning. And I do have a video I can link below about morning, and specifically the Groclock, and how that can help with toddlers and older children to help them sleep in a little bit more. So that's sometimes a cause that when we look at. And in general, some clients I have, it's not necessarily timing of sleep, it's more that their sleep is really disrupted in the night. So they're just waking up frequently in general, not getting, nice, long, restorative stretches, and then the next day they're more tired, and then that tiredness contributes to more wake ups, and it can kind of be a vicious cycle that happens. So sometimes to help with the night terrors, we have to just help them be better sleepers and learn to have those longer stretches and work on their independence and all of that. And that's the thing that makes them go away, is just putting the work in to start making changes. And next week, I'm going to do a video on how to help with children who are waking frequently, and how to kind of encourage those longer stretches and that more independent sleep that I get a lot of questions about. And that could be one of the pieces of the puzzle of removing the night terrors. Because for those children, there's really, timing of sleep, all of that can really only do so much. If they're not getting good enough sleep and able to sleep, then it's hard to make the night terrors go away. So sometimes we have to do that for it to be resolved. So I would say that's like a big piece of the puzzle too, is how restorative is their sleep. The same with naps. If a child isn't able to nap really well, it can be hard to not have them exhausted by bedtime. So we have to work on the sleep itself. So I'm going to talk about that next week. If you're watching this video after the fact, I'll link that video when it's done to the comments, or I'll link the live video as well, the link for it. So you can join me for that if you find that could be part of it. But I just encourage you to watch your child and try to figure out, what is a good day? What's a bad day? What little adjustments can I make? And again, sometimes it becomes clear to the parent, like, what might be going on, and they can kind of troubleshoot and figure it out by watching them and seeing the good versus bad days. And if you have a specific sleep difficulty that might be contributing to their exhaustion, feel free to post it below and I can make a video about it. It really is a lot of pieces that come together, so it's hard to say this is exactly how you eliminate night terrors, but it's very clear the signs of them are they're tired, and then the how is kind of the tricky part, because sometimes it's a bit of everything. It's the bedtime, making changes, and sometimes doing all those things end up eliminating the night terror in the end. So I'm always happy to talk about a topic if there's a specific struggle that you have. But I've heard a lot that waking up frequently in the night right now is a struggle, so I'm going to do a video on that one. And then I'm also going to have a live Q&A coming up as well. So if you want to stay connected, you can subscribe, follow along, and you'll be notified of that. And then that's a space that you can ask specific questions for your little one who might be having night terrors, or any questions that you have at all about sleep. So I'll post that as well. And yeah, so that's all I have. Feel free, again, ask some questions, and I'm always happy to create more content, and I love hearing what people are struggling with so that I can talk about it. And I hope that helps. And I hope that helps you have a nice rested summer and gives you some tips on what to look for in your little one. So bye for now. Happy sleeping.